So we're talking today about what attracts us in our art, both what we create and what we
see in others.
So, Liz, I'm just loving that painting behind you. I would stop on that on instantly if I saw it.
Yeah, there's some people. Thank you, Deni. I appreciate that. It was it was a strange creation late one night that just sort of wanted to be birthed. I was ready to leave the studio, and there was a canvas that I kind of started a week earlier, and anyway, it called me back, and 5 hours later, 2 o'clock in the morning, I left, and this is what happened. So thank you. So hi everybody. I can't see anybody's names or anything, so I'll just rely on Deni and when we post it over, but thanks for joining us. So yeah, our conversations today, what stops us in our tracks when we look at other people's work, and it's probably similar to what we think about in our own, right? So shall I share? Do you want to share first? Do you want to?
Yes, no, go for it, Liz. I'd love to hear what you think about it.
So thank you. So I think that it breaks down into some pretty simple aspects. And one of the things, and they're definitely when I'm scrolling through Instagram or I'm looking at a exhibition or some piece of design, or not, maybe not design, something where there's a personal aspect to it, where it's a unique creation. I really am struck, firstly, when I can see that the creator knows who they are and has a clear understanding of who they are, what their intentions are for sharing in the painting, but mostly that they know their voice and that it's unique to them. And so there's a lot of art out there, and as we know, abstract art's the hardest thing, but there's a lot of art out there that is just a lot of paint. It doesn't feel like there is a voice or an intention behind it. When I see a piece, and it can be very, very crazy, but if there's an intention and a clear voice, this artist who's standing behind it knows who they are and is reflecting that. They have a point of view, they have something to say in their work. It's like being in a room and noticing when somebody is holding they have a presence about them, they have an aura about them, that they have something to offer, they're confident. You sort of want to be alongside that person, and so that's what catches my eye in a painting. Is there's something unique to say, it's got a strong voice, and then the other thing that's really important to me is that they've understood the sort of basic fundamental principles to make a good piece of art. So there's contrast, they know how to use color to manipulate whatever it is they're trying to say, they know how to use their composition, they know how to move your eye around the painting, that all those elements that they have the skill to be able to communicate what it is that they're trying to say. And that's really, I think, what it boils down to for me. The rest is sort of whatever it leaves me in my own thoughts and my own, impression of it is varied. But if I can relate to that artist, the strength of the voice behind it and the intention, and then respect the skill of which it's being manipulated and created, it's a showstopper. How about you?
I think there's a few different things for me. First of all, there'd be emotion. So like if I was, for instance, just scrolling through Insta and I was looking at the art, there would just be a moment that stopped me. And it would probably be that it brings up some emotion for me. And I don't know that my brain would click into why that was. But I find that the art that strikes me is often quite simple. There's a simplicity to it. And maybe that's just what catches my eye, is the simplicity and strength. That's not necessarily the art I create, but it's the art that I'm that I'm struck with as I'm scrolling, or even when I'm out or at a gallery or a show. It's this there's something emotive that comes across in the simplicity. So that's one thing that attracts me. I love just two colors, or black and white, or just one stroke. Sometimes there's something so powerful about that when it's done really well. But there's other things. That's one thing. When I'm looking through art for inspiration, maybe there's certain things that I know I do in my art that I'm also attracted to. So, and I go through phases. Like went through a phase of really being attracted to seeing writing in pieces, not seeing what was written, but seeing writing. And I often wonder if that's because I love typography and I am a typographer. But I love just script writing or just seeing letters. That was one thing. And then there's color. Those, I mean, once again, the piece behind you, it's that beautiful muted pink with those dark browns. That's such a huge combination for me. And the flesh color that you've got in there. I mean, that I love working with. So I notice that I'm really attracted to see that in others' work and how they work with it. Then I love seeing pieces where I'm confused as to how they got there. So it's like a puzzle. And I may, in my explorations, try and work that out just for myself, just to kind of like unlock the mystery of it.
Tasting some food and thinking, gosh, how did they make that? What ingredients did they put in it?
Yeah. And so needing to taste it bit by bit in order to work it out. And once you've worked it out, then the mystery's gone a little bit, and it's somewhat, well, because it's lost its mystery, it almost loses its appeal to me in a way. But that is something that I notice I do, is I question, how did they do that? How is that technique? I need to find that out more, find out if that's interesting for me to create myself. And sometimes I go down a path and think, yeah, that's not enjoyable for me to create.
Yeah. I think, thank you. That's really interesting. I think we're actually saying the same things, because what I was sort of getting to was that understanding the fundamental principles are exactly what you say. Is somebody understands how to use color, somebody has made the conscious decision to simplify and to refine and to discern into a state that is clear and powerful, right? So that takes a skill level and an understanding of principles to be able to do that. And so I think it's the same thing, and you have to, and in order to do that, you need to invest in the skill and the time to be able to learn how to do that. But the other thing is the confidence of standing behind those really simple decisions is one to be revered. I think, because the simplicity, it's the ultimate in sophistication, but it takes a lot of confidence and a lot of understanding of the message that or the intention, or the message, or the voice of the painting, to be able to simplify it and siphon it into such a simple way. I mean, that definitely is very striking for me, for sure. But yeah, that's interesting when you say about the losing the mystery, because sharing techniques and sharing one's, not that we have secrets, but sharing one's less learnings and all the tools that we use to be able to create what we do. I'm very open about sharing my techniques in my courses, and I remember somebody fairly novice painter said, aren't you worried that everyone's going to be copying you and doing the same thing? I'm not, because I've been party to sharing techniques from other people, and it's not sustainable. But does that make you, I'm getting to a question, does it make you feel a little bit more reserved in terms of sharing your own techniques or your own sort of skills, because it demystifies it to the viewer?
For me, not at all. I have no wanting to hold anything back. I think that's there's this generosity about the artists that I've met and the communities that I've been in that I think is a beautiful thing. It's like, like having, these are all the ingredients that I put into my whatever it is, stew. When you use those ingredients, you're going to get a different dish. But I'd love to just share with you everything that I've got, and then hopefully someone will share something with me. So I have approached different artists and just said, oh man, I've seen you do this. I'm really interested in what product you use or how you get that transparency. And I've always been met with this most incredible generosity. So I feel I need to pass that on to anyone that asks me the questions.
Really nice. And I don't know, but I'm asked as well. What's really sweet when you get asked is, is when somebody will just say, love this painting, can you share about the technique, rather than what was that color that you used, or what was that sketchbook that you used? Like, there's nothing, a little bit of grace around it is nice. I mean, I don't mind sharing and answering, but I often get those kind of very direct questions. So yeah, I try, and if I'm ever asking, I try and talk about why I like it, and then offering to ask them to share it. But it is really beautiful being in this art community where we've been generously gifted by so many teachers.
What I'd love to ask you, Liz, is when you're creating, is it different for you what you follow in your own work, what you're attracted to in your own work?
That's $1 million question. Yes. Yeah, I think it really is. And I hadn't really, these are why these conversations are so good, because you don't really realize what's going on until you unpack it. I really do. So when I look at my work, I want there to be a level of skill. I want to have really understood, whether it's me fighting it to the ground or, wrestling with it. I want to have, in my mind, see that I've understood color. I've had the elements that creates interest and depth and history, but most of all that I'm communicating what it is, my intention for the painting, or the energy that I want to have out. And I've honored that, rather than being a sort of scattered, message. I want it to be, in my mind, as clear as I can possibly make an abstract, ethereal piece. So yeah, when I feel it's messy and just I've just thrown everything in there, and there's a tendency to do that. I don't know about you, but when I'm struggling with a piece, I'll throw everything at it. And that's almost the opposite of what I want to be able to end up with. Is I want that refined, but I also want it to look not over calculated and not overly construed. So it's that fine balance between the spontaneity and refinement that I love, that mixture of those two. And for me, I know there's certain, I'm looking at a couple of pieces I've got here now. There's certain things that I really need to have in the painting for me to feel at peace with it. And that is the contrast of texture and messy against a straight line, and shape and balance, and interest of layers. And then, when I feel as though I've got those things, then it's honoring the message of each painting. But it's the hardest thing I've ever done. It's so difficult, and I'm learning, and every time I open a paint tub, I'm learning new things about myself. And but it has helped me get to know myself a lot more. So I'm interested to see the pieces that show up, because they are they're evolving as yeah, for sure.
there was something that I think it was Jodie King. She said on it, I think it might have been her podcast that you directed me to. And she was talking about, I think, joy in creating, and that I think it might have been her. I'm sorry if I got it wrong and it wasn't her, but it was about feeling joy when you're creating, and that it needed to come from this joyful place. And it made me pause, because something that you just said about wrestling a piece to the ground, I relate to. It's not always like that, but sometimes there's a piece and I feel like it has been a tussle, like a war between the two of us. And then, I eventually get there, but it hasn't felt like a flow or a happy place. And that in itself to me is beautiful, because it's just this different creation. And I can see my struggle. I can see where I've won. I can see where I've lost. And I can see the amount of paint I had to put into that, the amount of soul I had to put into that. And that's kind of cool. I like that too. I like, the pieces that flow, that just kind of come off the brush. They're beautiful, and it's a whole different thing. But I love the contrast where, I guess for me, the messy against the clean, or the busy against the space, is where I feel like I do a tug of war. And it feels like a tug of war, and it takes, like you said, a lot out of me in the process.
And so when do you get to the point where you have, you feel as though you can stand back from it and hold it as finished? What are you?
I guess it's when the balance is right. And that's a piece that I just know. It may not be true for someone else looking at it, but for me, it feels balanced. There's something that just, I don't know, probably at that point, there's a joyfulness to it. There's right, okay. What about you? When do you know you're at that point?
Well, I think that like you, it has to feel, all the decisions that I have made along the tussling. So, you paint, you stand back, you make decisions. You paint, you stand back, you make decisions. That's what your voice is. That's what creates your voice. All those little decisions. When all those little decisions sit together in a harmonious way, along with the fundamental principles, then you can, it just sort of collides, and it sort of feels right. The art is to stop at that point and not over question it. I had a painting that I was working on, and it was perfectly fine. And then I threw a whole load of turquoise all over the middle of it and completely wrecked it. I've just pulled it back now, but that was just me not really listening and standing back enough. So that's where my design brain really does come in to say, is it well designed, and am I communicating what I want to communicate with it? And then you throw it out into the world.
Gosh, I understand that piece of throwing a color at maybe a glaze at a piece, and just thinking, oh, that was such a wrong move.
And were you quick enough to wipe it off? Because sometimes you can go, oh shit, and then get your spray bottles out. But not always. That's the fun thing is, taking those risks, and the more sort of confidence, the more experience you get, the more you can go, what the heck? Let me just try this. I'm not going to be precious about it, and see if it works. But it's based on something that is coming out through the painting, right? Something was calling. It was too busy. I needed some more space. It was, there was something that was missing, and I didn't get it right in what was missing, but I didn't really ask it enough. So,
and I think that there is an experimentation needed there. Like I think of the same thing. I think, well, that's gone now. I've wrecked that by that color, or it's going to need a lot more work. But I think it wasn't working before. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done that. So I'm not going to mourn what's gone. I needed to do something and it wasn't this, but that's not a mistake either. That's just like another growth, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. I really admire people that say, oh, I just could see it needed a little black square just up there. And that's it. It completely, that seems to be such a, that discernment of just those few little elements that you just got to add. I am not very good at doing that. It's like when I cut my son's hair, right? And they go, Mum, don't cut too much off. Don't cut too much off. And I'm at it. And before I know, they're like, Mum, you've cut so much off. What did we say? And I'm like, I can be a bit heavy handed on it, but the shape was going so well. It's just, sometimes it does take a obliteration, and sometimes it's just that little, those little things. It's that understanding. I think the more we look at other people's art and the more we realize what's resonating on an emotional level, the more it helps us be able to have that well from which we can decide on our own pieces from. When we know what we don't want, we can figure out what we do want a lot more, as Abraham Hicks would say, right? So
although sometimes that struggle, as in if I was to suddenly throw a color over a painting that wasn't working, I can sometimes push that too far. Like I'm just like, I feel like this is going to work, and I'll just keep going and keep going, when really I can tell straight away it didn't. But there's this resistance to me not being right or something, which is probably reflected in the rest of my life. I probably hold on to things
that's a telltale. Very interesting. But I can relate to that. I understand. It's like, no, I know this. I got this. There's a bit of ego going on in there, right? And this is going to work because this is what was. There was a feeling here, and I have to honor it. And it's a lovely dance.
just a little reveal about my personality. And
anything else you want to share about yourself?
Maybe not this week. Excuse my cough.
It does bring out the rawness in us. This, painting like this, it really, there ain't much hiding. And when you do hide, that's the other thing, is when people hide behind their work, or that, it's just like, you can see that. I want to see the real Deni in the struggles and the, none of us will ever know what they are, but I sort of want to see that that all those things come to a point, and that's your offering. It's a lovely gift to be able to give to your viewers.
And I wonder if that brings us to a full circle, where the art that stops us is where we can see inside the artist.
For sure, that they know who they are, right? That they've taken the time to know who they are, and that's what they're communicating. I spot that and can spot that a mile off. It's really very seductive and very it's very sexy to have that that knowledge, and that takes investment and vulnerability and courage to do that.
Well, Liz, my feeling is that this is going to be 2 lives, and I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to post them. So it's an experiment, but it's been lovely chatting. I think that next week, hopefully, we'll get it even more right.
Thank you, everybody, for bearing with us.
Yes, we will be back next week, and we will be getting better with these as each week comes. We're just experimenting, and we can't do that without being live.
Yes, that's really messed up. You kind of want to trial run and then be able to do it, but you can't do it on any platform. So we'll get there.
We'll get there.
Yeah. All right. Until next week.